The American author Joan Didion wrote a book about the sudden death of her husband, The Year of Magical Thinking. She said, "Life changes fast. Life changes in the instant. On July 15th, 2010, my life changed in an instant. My husband, Stuart Dolin, following a regular lunch with a business associate where he made an appointment for a follow-up meeting, left his office in downtown Chicago and walked to a nearby train platform in Chicago. By the way, a train platform that he never would have used. As the train approached, Stuart took his own life. A trauma nurse at the platform said she observed an agitated man pacing up and down the track before he leaped. This came as a complete shock to everyone who knew Stuart. As many people have said, if there were 1,000 people that would take their own life, Stuart would never have been on that list. Nobody saw this coming. He had the perfect life. We were high school sweethearts who met when we were 15 and 16. We were married for 36 years, but had known each other a total of 42. To those who knew us, we were the bar that was set for what it was meant to have: a fun, loving, connected, supportive, and caring partnership. My children, Zach and Barry, adored their father. Stuart always prioritized his family, and his most important role in life was husband, father, and friend. We were also, at the time of his death, debt-free. He was a senior partner of a large international law firm, managing hundreds of corporate lawyers. He enjoyed his work and derived satisfaction from cultivating relationships with his clients, as well as helping them achieve the results they desired. He was such a stellar leader that when he died, his law firm, Reed Smith, created an award in Stuart's honor. This is a quote from Reed Smith's website. The Stu Dolin Award for Client Service Excellence celebrates the legacy of the Reed Smith Chicago partner whose caring approach to collaboration and developing talents in others, along with an intense commitment to outstanding client service, set a standard for all Reed Smith lawyers. The Stu Dolin Award will be presented annually and in perpetuity to the Reed Smith client team whose performance best exemplifies those characteristics. He was 57 years old. If you asked anyone who knew him, he was laid back and high on life. There was an unbelievable disconnect between how he lived his life, a beautiful man, a beautiful life, the tragedy and the violence of his death. It just didn't make any sense. What happened that led to this horrible, inexplicable, shocking death? In the summer of 2010, Stuart developed some anxiety regarding work. He had no history of mental illness. At my suggestion, I thought he should contact his doctor to get on medication to help him deal with this situational anxiety. He was prescribed generic Paxil paroxetine. Very shortly after starting the generic version of Paxil, his anxiety became worse. He felt restless, had trouble sleeping, and was weepy. The night before he died, he kept tapping his leg at dinner, asked me to listen to a meditation tape with him, hardly typical behavior, and kept saying, "I still feel so anxious." He said he was going to get up the next morning and exercise to see if that would help deal with his anxiety. By 1:42 the next day, he was dead. How can I explain this? When you know a person for 42 years and you know them backwards and forwards, this just wasn't who he was. After Stuart's death, everyone kept trying to find clues, notes, emails. Nothing emerged. A friend of mine kept saying the only thing different about his life was he had been on Paxil for 6 days. Unbeknownst to me, she did her research and found a law firm, Bob Hedlund, that does Paxil litigation and went through the intake process. I didn't even know this. The intake coordinator said to tell your friend he suffered from a drug reaction, akathisia. I remember writing it on a piece of paper because I didn't know how to spell it. Nobody knew how to pronounce it. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I did all the extra reading in grad school. had never heard of that word. I went to my computer and Googled akathisia, Paxil, and suicide, and it was bone-chilling. I said, oh my God, that's what happened to Stuart. What had not made any sense suddenly became crystal clear. This was a heartbreaking realization that a drug that I thought was supposed to relieve anxiety or stress gave a person suicidal thoughts. The person didn't want to kill themselves, but wanted the inner restlessness and agitation to end. This lack of knowledge tragically resulted in akathisia sufferers like Stuart taking their own lives and leaving behind devastated loved ones. As one pharmaceutical expert said, death can be a welcome result. When I found out about akathisia and the lack of a black box warning for adults over 24, I knew that if this could happen to Stuart, that no one was immune. I also found out that GSK, the pharmaceutical company, had hidden for over 20 years that there was a 700% increase of suicide on Paxil. This is what made me motivated to make a difference. In fact, the drug lobby would like you to believe that akathisia is simply restless leg syndrome. As a result, sufferers of akathisia, as well as the medical professionals with whom they consult, are not able to recognize the symptoms of akathisia and haven't even heard of it. Had Stuart and I known the warning signs, we could have taken action to stop the medicine and then the deadly side effect. In June of 2013, I started MIST, the Medication-Induced Suicide Prevention and Education Foundation in memory of Stuart Dolin. I am on a mission to bring awareness to a word that no one has ever heard of, yet changed my life forever. MIST aims to ensure that people suffering from akathisia symptoms are accurately diagnosed so that needless deaths are prevented. We have a website, have created educational materials. We were invited to the United States Academy of Armed Services physicians, over 400 military doctors who were so excited for what we're doing because the increase of military suicides in the United States is unheard of, and this has been the most highly medicated group of veterans that ever have come back from war, and nobody wants to see the connection between the number of drug cocktails they're given and suicide. My story was featured on our local news channel, NBC5 Chicago, in 2014. For our organization, it's important to know that we're not anti-drug, but we want truth and disclosure, honesty in reporting, drug side effects, legitimate drug trials not controlled by big pharma. For me personally, as a social worker, I always suggest alternative forms of ways to relieve anxiety, meditation, exercise, healthy eating. My final thoughts is if Stuart is speaking to all of us today. When Stuart was in his first year of law school, he came home from a business law class and was upset. He had learned a phrase in that class, the cost of doing business. And he was disturbed by this concept as a kind and caring human being. He couldn't understand how lives could be lost to achieve profits. I've often thought of that over the last 5 years when thinking of Stuart's death by Paxil and akathisia. Stuart was the cost of doing business. However, it was a huge cost to those of all of us who loved and cherished his life. We are all here today. I have traveled very far to make a difference and try to prevent these needless deaths from happening to more innocent people. Thank you.